The year is 1935. Harlem is burning, but not from fire. It's burning from something far more dangerous. Words spoken in anger, insults that cut deeper than any blade, and a debt that can only be paid in blood. This is the story of how a single racial slur sparked a silent war, how 8 men died in 7 days, and how the streets learned a lesson they would never forget. In Harlem, respect isn't given. It's earned, enforced, and when violated, avenged without mercy. Dutch Schultz stands in a speakeasy on Lenox Avenue, cigar smoke curling around his face like the coils of a serpent. He's surrounded by his men, white faces in expensive suits, laughing too loud, drinking too freely. They own this room, or at least they think they do. Schultz controls the numbers racket across Harlem, pulling thousands of dollars a week from the pockets of working black families who bet their grocery money on 3-digit dreams. He's made himself rich off their hope, and he feels untouchable because of it. But tonight, something shifts. A messenger arrives, a young black man named Marcus, sent by Bumpy Johnson with a simple message. The independent numbers runners want a bigger cut, or they walk. It's business, nothing personal. But Schultz doesn't see it that way. His face reddens, veins bulging at his temples. He stands abruptly, the table shaking, glasses rattling. And then he says it, the word that will cost him everything. He calls Bumpy Johnson a slur so vile, so cutting, that the room falls silent. Even his own men flinch. Marcus doesn't respond. He simply nods, turns, and walks out into the Harlem night. But his eyes, everyone sees it, his eyes are already planning funerals. The message reaches Bumpy Johnson within the hour. He's sitting in the back room of a barbershop on 145th Street, playing chess with Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of numbers herself. She's the one who first gave Bumpy his foothold in the underworld, who taught him that power isn't about being the loudest, it's about being the smartest. When Marcus delivers the news, Bumpy's face doesn't change. He doesn't shout. He doesn't flip the board. He simply moves his knight, capturing Stephanie's bishop, and says 4 words, "Count starts at sunrise." Stephanie knows what that means. So does everyone else in the room. Bumpy Johnson doesn't respond with words. He responds with action, swift and surgical. He's not a man who makes threats. He makes examples. And in Harlem, where reputation is everything, where respect is the only currency that matters, Dutch Schultz has just written a check his life can't cash. The first body drops on Monday morning. His name is Tommy Rourke, one of Schultz's collection enforcers. He's found in an alley behind the Cotton Club, 2 bullets in the back of the head, execution style. No witnesses. No noise. Just a message. The police chalk it up to gang activity, file the report, and move on. But the streets know better. The streets always know. Tuesday brings the second death. Frank DiMaggio, a numbers runner who worked directly under Schultz, is discovered slumped in his car near the Apollo Theater. Single shot to the temple. The engine is still running. His morning coffee is still warm in the cup holder. Whoever killed him got close enough to see the fear in his eyes. The word spreads fast. Bumpy's people are moving like ghosts, and no one is safe. By Wednesday, Schultz is rattled. He calls an emergency meeting with his top lieutenants, men who've been with him since the bootlegging days of Prohibition. They gather in a basement on the Lower East Side, away from Harlem, away from Bumpy's reach, or so they think. Schultz paces like a caged animal, sweat staining his collar despite the cool autumn air. He barks orders: double the guards, arm everyone, shoot first, ask questions never. But his men see it in his eyes, the doubt, the realization that he's made a mistake he can't undo. That same night, a 3rd man dies. Leo Marks, Schultz's accountant, the man who keeps the books on every dollar that flows through the numbers game. He's shot outside his apartment in the Bronx, far from the usual battlegrounds. The killer leaves no evidence, no shell casings, nothing. It's clean, professional, and terrifying. Schultz's empire is built on numbers, on records, on knowing who owes what. With Leo dead, that foundation cracks. Thursday morning, the violence escalates. 2 men this time, brothers named Sal and Vito Greco, muscle for Schultz's operation. They're found in a warehouse in Brooklyn, bound and executed. This isn't random. This is targeted. Bumpy's people aren't just killing, they're dismantling Schultz's network piece by piece, cutting off his hands before they go for his throat. The message is clear, every insult has a price, and Schultz is paying in installments of blood. The city is watching now. Newspaper reporters smell a story, but they can't get close. The police know something is happening, but no one talks. This is Harlem's business, and Harlem handles its own. Meanwhile, Dutch Schultz is losing control. His men are scared, jumping at shadows, questioning whether loyalty to him is worth their lives. Some start to disappear, fleeing the city before they become the next name in the obituaries. Friday brings the sixth death. Anthony "Big Tony" Russo, one of Schultz's most trusted enforcers, a man who's killed for him, lied for him, bled for him. He's found in the Hudson River, weighted down with chains. It takes the police 3 days to identify the body. By then it doesn't matter. Everyone already knows who did it and why. Bumpy Johnson is erasing Dutch Schultz's empire, one soldier at a time. Saturday is when the fear truly sets in. The seventh victim is a man named Eddie Sullivan, a low-level runner who made the mistake of laughing when Schultz said the slur. He didn't know Bumpy Johnson personally, never crossed him directly, but that night in the speakeasy he laughed. And in this war, even witnesses pay the price. Eddie is found in an abandoned tenement on the west side, a single bullet wound, clean and efficient. His death sends a message to everyone who heard that insult. Silence would have saved you, complicity will kill you. Dutch Schultz is unraveling. His operation, once the most feared in New York, is collapsing under the weight of invisible retaliation. He can't see his enemy. He can't predict the next move. Bumpy Johnson operates in shadows, through intermediaries, through a network so tight that not even torture could break it. Schultz's men don't know who to trust anymore. Every handshake could be a setup. Every conversation could be their last. By Sunday, the city holds its breath. 7 men dead in 6 days, and everyone knows the count isn't finished. Schultz holes up in a fortified apartment in Midtown, surrounded by armed guards, barely sleeping, drinking himself into paranoia. He's made calls to mob bosses in other cities, begging for reinforcements, for help, for anything. But no one wants to touch this. No one wants to step into a war where the rules are written in blood and Bumpy Johnson holds the pen. The 8th death comes quietly, almost poetically. It's Sunday night, and the victim is a man named Victor Kane, Schultz's personal driver and confidant. Victor is the one who drove Schultz to that speakeasy, the one who stood by the door while the insult was delivered. He's killed in his own home in Queens, in front of his family. One shot, clean through the heart, while his wife and children watch in horror. The killer leaves a note, just 2 words, debt paid. 8 men. 7 days. Not a single arrest. Not a single witness willing to talk. The police know what happened, but they also know better than to dig too deep. This is Harlem justice, street justice, the kind that doesn't make it into courtrooms or official records. This is the kind of justice that reminds everyone that some debts can't be negotiated, some insults can't be forgiven, and some men can't be touched without consequences. Dutch Schultz survives, but his empire doesn't. The numbers racket in Harlem shifts hands almost overnight. Bumpy Johnson doesn't take it by force, he takes it by default. Schultz's remaining men either pledge loyalty to Bumpy or disappear from the city entirely. The speakeasies, the runners, the collectors, they all answer to a new boss now, a black man who proved that respect isn't about skin color, it's about power, intelligence, and the willingness to do what others won't. In the weeks that follow, Schultz tries to rebuild, but he's a broken man. His reputation is shattered. The other mob bosses see him as weak, as someone who let a racial slur cost him everything. He loses allies, loses territory, loses the fear that once kept him safe. And though he'll live for a few more months, until his own violent end in a Newark restaurant, the truth is that Dutch Schultz died that week in Harlem. He just didn't know it yet. Bumpy Johnson, meanwhile, rises. He doesn't gloat, doesn't make speeches, doesn't parade through the streets. He simply continues doing what he's always done, running his operations with precision, treating his people with respect, and enforcing the rules of the streets with an iron will. The 8 deaths become legend, a cautionary tale told in barbershops and pool halls, a reminder that words carry weight and disrespect carries a cost. The newspapers never get the full story. They report gang violence, turf wars, the usual suspects. But the people of Harlem know the truth. They know that their own protected them, that a man who looked like them stood up to a powerful white gangster and won. Bumpy Johnson becomes more than a criminal. He becomes a symbol, a figure of resistance in a world that tries to crush black ambition at every turn. Stephanie St. Clair watches it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. She knew Bumpy had it in him, knew that one day he'd become the kind of leader Harlem needed. She's the one who taught him that power isn't loud, it's strategic. That revenge isn't hot, it's cold and calculated. And that in a world where the law doesn't protect you, you protect yourself. The 8 men who died were soldiers in someone else's war, pawns sacrificed in a game they didn't fully understand. Tommy Rourke, Frank DiMaggio, Leo Marx, Sal and Vito Greco, Anthony Russo, Eddie Sullivan, Victor Kane. Their names are forgotten by history, but in that moment, their deaths meant everything. They were the price of arrogance, the cost of disrespect, the proof that in Harlem, no one is untouchable. Dutch Schultz never apologizes. He can't, his pride won't let him, and even if it did, it's too late. The damage is done. The insult echoed through the streets like a gunshot, and the response came like thunder. 8 bodies in 7 days, and the message is burned into the memory of every gangster, every hustler, every man who thinks his power makes him invincible. The aftermath is a strange, tense piece. Harlem doesn't celebrate, but there's a shift in the air, a sense that something fundamental has changed. The white gangsters who once moved through the neighborhood like they owned it now walk carefully, speak respectfully, and think twice before crossing the men who run the streets. Bumpy Johnson has rewritten the rules without saying a word, and everyone understands the new reality. In the hidden corners of the underworld, the story spreads. In Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, the bosses hear about what happened in Harlem. They hear about Dutch Schultz's mistake and Bumpy Johnson's response. Some laugh it off as regional drama, but the smart ones pay attention. They understand that the world is changing, that the old hierarchies are crumbling, and that disrespect, especially racial disrespect, can no longer be thrown around without consequence. Bumpy himself remains elusive. He's not interested in fame or notoriety. He operates from the shadows, a phantom pulling strings, making decisions that ripple through the criminal underworld. He meets with other black leaders in Harlem, not just criminals, but community organizers, business owners, church leaders. He understands that real power isn't just about controlling the streets, it's about controlling the narrative, about being someone the community respects and protects. The police, for their part, are frustrated. They know what happened, they have theories, they have suspects. But they have no evidence, no witnesses, no way to build a case that will hold up in court. Every lead goes cold. Every interrogation hits a wall. The people of Harlem close ranks, and the code of silence is absolute. In a neighborhood where the police are seen as occupiers rather than protectors, no one is going to help them solve murders that the community sees as justice. Detective William Morrison, a hardened investigator with 20 years on the force, is assigned to the case. He's seen gang wars before, knows the patterns, knows how these things usually play out. But this is different. There's no trail of anger, no sloppy mistakes, no emotional outbursts. This was surgical, planned, executed with military precision. Morrison interviews dozens of people, but they all say the same thing. They didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, don't know anything. He knows they're lying, but he also knows he'll never prove it. Morrison eventually gives up. He writes in his report that the deaths were likely connected to organized crime disputes, closes the files, and moves on to cases he has a chance of solving. Years later, in his retirement, he'll admit to a journalist that he knew exactly what happened, knew it was retaliation for an insult, knew Bumpy Johnson was behind it. But he also admits that part of him, a small, quiet part, didn't blame him. Some things, Morrison will say, aren't meant for the courts. Some things are settled in the streets. For Bumpy Johnson, the week of violence is a turning point. It establishes him not just as a player in Harlem's underworld, but as the dominant force. Other criminals come to him for permission, for approval, for protection. He becomes a gatekeeper, deciding who operates and who doesn't. And he does it with a fairness that surprises many. He's ruthless when he needs to be, but he's also pragmatic. He understands that stability is good for business, that constant war drains resources and draws unwanted attention. Madame Stephanie St. Clair steps back gradually, letting Bumpy take the lead. She's groomed him for this, shaped him into the leader she knew he could be. She continues to run her own operations, but she does it in partnership with Bumpy, a rare alliance in a world where trust is almost non-existent. Together, they create a structure that will dominate Harlem's underworld for years to come, a structure built on loyalty, respect, and the understanding that some lines should never be crossed. Dutch Schultz fades into irrelevance in Harlem. He still has power in other parts of New York, still has connections and resources. But Harlem is lost to him, and everyone knows it. He tries to save face, makes public statements about consolidating his operations, about focusing on other opportunities. But the truth leaks through the cracks. He was challenged, insulted a man he thought was beneath him, and paid the price. His peers see him differently now, not as the feared enforcer, but as a cautionary tale. On October 23, 1935, just weeks after the Harlem killings, Dutch Schultz is shot in a Newark restaurant. He lingers for hours, delirious and rambling, before dying from his wounds. The official story is that rival mobsters ordered the hit over disputes about territory and money. But in Harlem, people whisper a different truth. They say that Schultz was already dead, that the 8 men who fell that week took his soul with them, and the bullets in Newark just finished the job. Bumpy Johnson doesn't comment on Schultz's death. He doesn't need to. He's already moved on, building his empire, solidifying his legacy. In the years to come, he'll become one of the most powerful figures in Harlem, a man who controls vice and crime, but also a man who invests in the community, who protects local businesses, who commands respect from criminals and citizens alike. His story will inspire countless others, a testament to the power of intelligence, strategy, and the refusal to be disrespected. The 8 men who died remain nameless to most of the world. They were criminals, yes, but they were also symbols. Symbols of what happens when arrogance meets consequence, when power forgets that it's fragile, when insult demands retaliation. Their deaths weren't random violence. They were a message written in blood, delivered with precision, and received with fear. Harlem remembers that week in 1935 not as a tragedy, but as a reckoning. It's the week the streets proved they had their own justice system, their own codes, their own kings. It's the week Dutch Schultz learned that skin color doesn't determine power, and it's the week Bumpy Johnson showed the world that respect isn't requested, it's demanded, and if necessary, enforced. The story fades from headlines but lives on in whispers. Old men tell it in bars, passing down the legend to younger generations. Writers hint at it in crime novels, always changing names and details but keeping the core truth intact. And in Harlem, on quiet nights when the streets are empty and the ghosts of the past seem to walk among the living, people remember the 8 men who died, the insult that killed them, and the man who made sure that debt was paid in full. The legacy of those 7 days in 1935 extends far beyond the immediate violence. It marks a shift in the power dynamics of American organized crime, particularly in how black criminals are perceived and treated by their white counterparts. Before Bumpy Johnson's calculated retaliation, black gangsters were often seen as subordinate, as street-level operators who collected for the real bosses. After, that perception begins to crack. Bumpy understands something fundamental that Dutch Schultz never grasped. Respect in the criminal world isn't about race, it's about capability. It's about whether you can protect your territory, enforce your rules, and retaliate against those who cross you. By methodically eliminating 8 men in 7 days without a single arrest or solid lead, Bumpy demonstrates a level of organizational sophistication that rivals any white mob operation. He proves that black criminals can operate with the same ruthlessness, the same strategic thinking, and the same impunity as their white counterparts. The numbers racket in Harlem flourishes under Bumpy's control. Where Schultz squeezed every dollar without regard for the community, Bumpy takes a different approach. He ensures that some of the profits flow back into Harlem, into businesses, into families who fall on hard times, into community initiatives that the city government ignores. This isn't altruism, it's strategy. By investing in the community, Bumpy ensures their loyalty and their silence. People protect him because he protects them, creating a network of support that no police investigation can penetrate. The relationship between Bumpy and law enforcement becomes complex and nuanced. Some cops are on his payroll, providing warnings about raids and investigations. Others simply turn a blind eye, understanding that Bumpy's brand of order is preferable to the chaos that might emerge without him. There's an unspoken arrangement. Bumpy keeps the violence contained, keeps the worst excesses in check, and the police don't push too hard. It's a devil's bargain, but one that both sides find acceptable. In the broader criminal landscape, Bumpy begins to network with other black gangsters across the country. He connects with operators in Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, and Atlanta, sharing strategies and creating loose alliances. These connections lay the groundwork for what will eventually become more formalized black organized crime networks. Bumpy becomes not just a local legend, but a national figure, someone young criminals aspire to emulate. The psychological impact of the 8 killings on those who remain in Schultz's organization is profound. Men who once swaggered through Harlem with impunity now move carefully, speaking respectfully to everyone they encounter. The racial slurs that once flowed freely from their mouths dry up overnight. It's not that their prejudices disappear, they don't, but fear proves to be an excellent teacher. They learn that their whiteness doesn't protect them, that power is earned and maintained through actions, not inherited through skin color. Years later, when Bumpy Johnson himself faces legal troubles and eventual imprisonment, the story of Dutch Schultz's insult becomes part of his legend. Inmates and guards alike know the tale, and it gives Bumpy a reputation that protects him behind bars just as effectively as it did on the streets. No one wants to cross a man who responded to a verbal insult with 8 calculated murders. The story becomes a shield, a warning that precedes him into every room, every yard, every negotiation. The 8 victims' families receive financial compensation, though not from any official source. Anonymous envelopes arrive with cash, enough to cover funeral expenses and provide some cushion. It's never traced back to anyone specific, but the families understand where it comes from. Even in his ruthlessness, Bumpy follows a code. The men died because of their association with Schultz, not because of personal grudges. Their families shouldn't suffer more than necessary. Dutch Schultz's final months are marked by increasing paranoia and isolation. He drinks heavily, trusts fewer people, and makes increasingly erratic decisions. Some historians argue that the Harlem incident broke something in him, shattered his confidence and his sense of invincibility. When he's finally gunned down in that Newark restaurant, some see it as inevitable. A man who lost his edge, who made too many enemies, who no longer commanded the fear necessary to survive in his world. The police files on the 8 murders remain officially unsolved, gathering dust in precinct basements. Occasionally, a young detective stumbles across them, becomes intrigued, and starts asking questions. They quickly learn what their predecessors learned. No one talks, no evidence exists, and pursuing the case is a career dead end. The files get refiled, the questions stop, and the legend grows. In Harlem itself, the memory of that week becomes shorthand for a certain kind of justice. When someone is wronged, when an insult cuts too deep, people say, "Handle it like Bumpy handled Dutch." It's understood as a call for calculated, complete retaliation, for making the cost of disrespect so high that no one dares repeat the offense. The phrase enters the local lexicon, passing from generation to generation. Madame Stephanie St. Clair, watching all of this unfold, feels a mixture of pride and concern. Pride because Bumpy has become everything she hoped, smart, strategic, and respected. Concern because she knows that kind of power attracts attention, and attention brings danger. She warns him repeatedly to be careful, to not get too comfortable, to always watch his back. Bumpy listens, but there's a confidence in him now, a sense that he's untouchable. It's the same confidence that destroyed Dutch Schultz, and Stephanie worries about where it might lead. The 8 deaths are never formally connected by authorities, though anyone who understands the streets knows the truth. Each murder is filed separately, investigated separately, and eventually closed separately. It's only in the collective memory of Harlem that they form a cohesive narrative, a single story of challenge and response, insult and vengeance, disrespect and death. As the years pass and Bumpy Johnson's legend grows, the incident with Dutch Schultz becomes the origin story, the moment when he transitioned from capable operator to dominant force. It's the story that defines him, that explains why people fear him, respect him, and follow him. It's proof that he doesn't make idle threats, doesn't bluff, and doesn't forgive. Cross him, and the response will be swift, surgical, and devastating. The lesson of 1935 echoes through decades of American crime history. It teaches that words have consequences, that racial insults carry costs, and that power isn't determined by skin color but by will, intelligence, and the capacity for calculated violence. It shows that in a world where the law doesn't protect everyone equally, people create their own systems of justice, their own codes of conduct, their own ways of settling debts. In the end, the story of Dutch Schultz's insult and Bumpy Johnson's response is about more than gang warfare or racial tension. It's about dignity, about refusing to be diminished, about demanding respect in a world that tries to deny it. It's about 8 men who died not because of what they did, but because of what their boss said, and about a single week when Harlem proved that its streets had rules, its people had power, and its justice was absolute. The city whispered the truth then, and the echoes of that whisper can still be heard today. In Harlem, respect is everything, disrespect costs everything, and some debts are paid only in blood.